We've got some good news for the Steam Deck, some bad news for the ROG Ally, a big update coming next week, more leaks for the PS5 Pro. Some people are accusing Sony of lying to us. Some devs just got some very good news, while others are losing their jobs. But first, let's talk about the good Steam Deck news. Now, to be fair, this isn't just good news for the deck, it's for anyone who's playing PC games on lower-end systems. Advancements in hardware have slowed in recent years. Both people from Sony have said so, folks from Microsoft had said this, and because of this, you just don't see those generational leaps from one gen to the next. In fact, I bet most people would not be able to tell you the difference between a game running on PS4 Pro or PS5. Not you guys are dialed in, but most people. This is one of the reasons I'm skeptical about the generational leap that Xbox is promising to come later on this year. But that doesn't mean that we can't have big software advances. In fact, rumors are surrounding the PS5 Pro. They're always talking about this new upscaling feature called PSSR. On top of that, Microsoft is working on their own API that can combine things like NVIDIA's DLSS, AMD's FSR, and Intel's XESS without devs needing to target Microsoft's upscaling API directly. If you don't know what upscaling is, it's tech that allows you to run your games at lower resolution, but then takes that lower resolution and upscales it to a higher resolution. So you could run a game at 1080p, and then the game could upscale to 1440p or 4K, and you might not be able to tell the difference between real 4K and an upscaled 4K. And if you can't tell the difference, then does it really matter? You know what else you might not be able to tell the difference is whether or not you're running a game locally or streaming it from the cloud with the sponsor of today's episode, Maximum Settings. You can experience your entire Steam library at peak performance. Say goodbye to the constraints imposed by handheld PC hardware limitations. You can get higher frame rates, you can unlock enhanced ray tracing support, and you can push all of your settings to the max with the sponsor of today's episode, Maximum Settings. Maximum Settings is a cloud PC rental service where you get access to a PC that can play the games that your hardware can't. And when I say that it's a PC, that is exactly what it is. It's just like having access to a PC. When you're playing on Maximum Settings, you have access to the entire machine while you're using it. Maximum Settings runs their games using Linux Mint, a lightweight operating system that uses fewer resources, kind of like SteamOS. It also has Proton pre-installed, so anything that you can run on a Steam Deck will run on Maximum Settings, just at Maximum Settings. But you're not limited to using it on a handheld. I used it on my Mac because I wanted to play games on a bigger screen. You can also use it on smartphones, Android devices, and tablets, pretty much anything with an internet connection and a screen. So if you want to try pushing your settings to the max, then check out the link in the description down below. But back to upscaling. As more and more games previously exclusive to consoles end up on PC, I feel like upscaling tech becomes more important, as devs can't really rely on specific hardware profiles, and by making sure that games support upscaling, that opens up more customers to them because they can run those on systems and lower the system requirements. Well, recently, Horizon Forbidden West, Porthouse Nixie's Software, hopefully I said that right, they responded to this tweet, which I found over at SteamDeckHQ.com. It's good that they're working on supporting FSR 3. They were already supporting DLSS, but that tech is limited not only to NVIDIA cards, but also a small subset of NVIDIA cards. As Noah points out in his article, if they use FSR 3.1, it could open up frame generation with other upscalers like Intel's XESS. The reason I bring all of this up is because I feel like this is the next battleground when it comes to gaming technology. This gen, it seemed like it was all about ray tracing, although I feel like many people who have the hardware in order to pull off ray tracing turn that stuff off in order to get better frame rates. But upscaling is something that benefits pretty much everyone. Though I will say that of all of the upscaling options, FSR is definitely one of the worst ones. It's better than no option, and it has the benefit of running on any hardware that you want, but it's just not as good as the other ones. And speaking of hardware software interactions, we just had an update on Windows that is apparently slowing down your ROG Ally. This was posted over on Twitter from Windows Latest. They said, This Windows 11 update and recent driver updates released in March 2024 could make your Asus ROG Ally and other AMD hardware slower than usual and cause performance issues. ROG Ally users are experiencing massive performance drops after installing the recent March 2024 update. Now, this was actually posted on March 17th, so it's a couple of weeks old, but I somehow missed it, and I figured if you somehow missed it, then maybe you have the update and you want to know how to fix the issues. Here's what you do. Open the Adrenaline app, click on Settings, then Preferences, disable the overlay, and then close the app and restart your ROG Ally. Once you're back up and running, if that didn't actually fix the performance issues, then you'll have a couple more options to try in order to fix this. I'll leave the other methods on screen for a second so you can pause and take a screenshot or try and fix it while looking at my stupid face. Speaking of updates, we've got a big update coming this week with indie games and the III initiative, which is a collaboration between some of the biggest indie devs out there. Some of these companies are so big that you might argue that maybe they aren't really indie anymore, so they decided to create the III initiative and make a bunch of indie announcements all at once on the 10th. Now, we tend to record the NerdNest podcast on Sundays, so we won't be able to discuss what's actually happening in the next episode of the podcast, but you're going to want to tune in to that next episode anyway, because we're going to have a discussion, maybe an argument, about what exactly qualifies these days as an indie game, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to the III. They're going to have world premieres, exclusive gameplay, they're going to have demos, they're going to have games that are like shadow dropping. I was talking to Rich about this, and he is convinced that the Xbox leak that we saw about Hollow Knight Silksong will end up manifesting itself as a release on the 10th, or at least we'll find out what day it's coming out on the 10th. I'm hoping that we'll see more from Shovel Knight developer Yacht Club Games. They have Mina the Howler, and they've shown that game off quite a few times. I know that friend of the show, Bob Wolf, has nothing but good things to say about the game. He has had hands-on with it multiple times. Anyway, who is putting on this thing? Well, it's the devs behind Dead Cells, Darkest Dungeon, Slay the Spire, and a whole bunch more. All those games I just mentioned are absolute bangers, especially Darkest Dungeon. Check it out if you haven't. Evil Empire's co-founder Benjamin Lowlin said this: "We came up with this idea when we had to announce our game and couldn't find a fitting place to announce it in the showcase landscape. Because on one side, there are these big showcases such as the Game Awards, which are more for AAA games and games with really huge budgets. And on the other hand, there are showcases that may be more focused on smaller indies, and we couldn't really identify ourselves as a studio, between those two. We felt like there was this in-between spot that needed to be filled somehow." Rodrigue Duperron, sorry if I screwed up your name, pal, he works at Thunder Lotus Games, and he said this: "We literally for years have been building our entire plan about how to announce games around the big tentpole releases. It's part and parcel of being a company our size. That fear that you're going to announce something and it just sort of floats away into the ether or gets stomped out by one of the bigger announcements just hours or days later, and no one remembers your game." So there was just something so obvious about what our friends here tried to put together. It's a need that exists, and I am excited for it. But let's get back to that upscaling technology I talked about a little bit ago. Like I said earlier in the video, a lot of the leaks around the PS5 Pro mention Sony's new Upscaling Tech PSSR, which stands for PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. Well, with a new Pro console comes new games, or not new games, but extended games, enhanced, that's the word I'm looking for, enhanced games to support it. This isn't going to be like when you buy a new PC and suddenly all of your games suddenly look better without the devs lifting a finger. When a game comes to PS5, the devs have baked in how the game performs. Sometimes they give you the ability to switch between, more resolution or more frame rate, but everything's pretty much buttoned up at that point. The addition of a new console that's more powerful than the last one means that publishers are going to have to enhance their games in order to take advantage of this new hardware. We saw this with cross-gen games on the PS4 and PS5. We saw it on, previously when the Xbox One X came out or the PS4 Pro was announced. Well, it looks like we got a leak of the requirements in order for a game to be labeled a PS5 Pro Enhanced, and internally it's called Trinity Enhanced. So what needs to be enhanced? How are publishers going to get that box ticked on their games? 3 things. First, they have to support PSSR in order to upscale all the way up to 4K. Most games on a console don't run at 4K, and even if they did, even if the PS5 box said 8K, the games will also need to have a constant 60 frames per second. The game has to increase or add ray tracing effects as well. Now, the PSSR is the big deal here. I'll talk about that in a little bit. This is coming from Tom Henderson over at Insider Gaming, and he's been a pretty damn reliable source. Publishers will also get the enhanced label if they've increased target resolution for titles that run at a fixed resolution on a standard console, if they increase the the minimum resolution for titles that run at variable resolution on the standard console, or if they increase the target frame rate for titles that run at a fixed frame rate on the standard console, and finally, if they include PS5 Pro ray tracing effect. Like I said a second ago, I feel like PSSR is going to be doing the heavy lifting here, and why I'm excited about it is hopefully if devs are targeting PSSR, maybe that work will translate to other upscaling tech that's used more on PC. So anyway, if PSSR is doing the heavy lifting, then what devs are going to do is they're going to increase the effects, run the game at a lower res, upscale to 4K using PSSR, get that 60 frames per second, and then you get the label. And that sounds really good to me, especially if PSSR is hard to differentiate from actual real 4K. Speaking of PlayStation, Jim Ryan is officially retired from his position as the big cheese over at PlayStation, but on his way out, he dropped a bomb about the PlayStation 2 that I feel like no one was expecting. He said on the official PlayStation podcast that the PS2 had sold 160 million units. This is 5 million units higher than the official number. But Sony kind of stopped reporting on PS2 sales a long time ago, and I'm sure that there were some PS2s still in the pipeline, and they were continued to be sold after Sony stopped reporting. Of course, some fanboys got all up in arms, accusing Sony of lying about this, trying to take something away from Nintendo as the Switch approaches the highest selling console of all time. That extra 5 million systems put Nintendo back a step, but I think Ryan was simply answering questions. Honestly, I don't get why people care. I think it's interesting which systems are selling more, which systems are selling less, but I don't care about which ones are selling more and less. I'm mentioning it because I find it interesting, though. Some people got outright upset about it. Speaking of PlayStation sales, the Sony PS5 is also on track to surpass the sales of the PS2, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. But in December 2023, Sony announced that they'd sold 50 million units of the PS5 already. With PS5 Pros coming and Xbox seemingly floundering, it seems like it could happen, though it would be tough, especially since the PS2 sold for about 12 years, from 2004 to 2013. We're only 4 years into the PS5 life cycle, and though it doesn't feel like it's been that long since there were so many supply chain issues at the start, both for Sony and for Microsoft. Moving on to some good news and some bad news. I'll start with the good news, and we'll get to the bad news in a second. The good news is posted over on Twitter by Jason Schreier from Bloomberg.com. He reports that workers at Sega of America have just ratified a contract that gives them guaranteed raises, just cause, and other benefits. It's the first union contract at a major U.S. gaming company. I mean, this year, thousands and thousands of devs have lost their jobs, while publishers have made buckets of cash. I think that this comes from, and this is just me talking, from irresponsible hiring decisions where they hire way more people than they need in order to get a job done. Then when they get the job done, they fire a bunch of people. Now, since I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a labor relations specialist and I'm just a guy in his attic, I don't know if this contract will actually protect devs over at Sega from this kind of thing, but it will give them the other benefits that Schreier listed in his tweet. Meanwhile, the bad news is that Embracer Group is no longer in charge of Gearbox Entertainment, which you might hear and think, oh, that's actually good news, right? I mean, Embracer Group kind of sucks, don't they? Well, it seems like getting sold from Embracer Group didn't actually save the employees at Gearbox, as less than a day after getting sold off, Take-Two laid off a whole bunch of people. Right now, we don't know how many were actually laid off, but it seems like a lot. Anyway, it sucks. I hope those people find new jobs or make new companies or, get picked up by a AAA publisher or something, because I had a blast playing Borderlands 3, and I think that those people that worked there did a great job. I know it isn't everybody's favorite Borderlands, but it was the first one that I played, and I finished it, which I never do with games. Speaking of finishing games, I'm about halfway through the story in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Thanks, Square, for the review copy. And after about 60 hours, I am still loving this game. I need to buckle down and finish it, but if you haven't played it, you absolutely need to. If you don't have a PlayStation, you're going to want to wait till it comes to PC, which will hopefully not be all that long. And it won't be long before you get to watch this next video right here. From the Nerd Nest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everyone.